Oh boy, my Of Empires deck finally worked. I got all 3 pieces in play.
Nice try, kid. Maybe next time you should bring a real deck. Rah!
A fun commander game is one where everyone gets to do their thing. I've heard this sentiment echoed all over the internet for years. And I think maybe there was a time when this might have been true. But over the years, I think players have trended towards their thing being tied to their win condition. And I think this makes it harder for everyone to do their thing. So I wanted to make a video exploring why that is and what we can do about it. But first, if you want to buy any of the cards I talk about here, consider going to Cool Stuff Inc. and using code TTM at checkout for a discount. It also supports the channel. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. So what does it mean to have your deck do its thing? Well, this ultimately will depend on the goal of your deck. You might have many goals for a deck. I made one which turns the game into Uno. There are a lot of different goals you could have in Commander, but I want to focus on what I'll say are normal decks, for lack of a better term. Decks that aim to win. I'm not saying CEDH, but a deck that isn't characters sitting in chairs or some other themed deck with a massive restriction. Think about some of your decks. You could probably come up with some idea of what the goal is. It could be going wide with creatures and then using an anthem, or reanimating a big creature. Maybe slamming a ton of enchantments on your commander to swing in for lethal commander damage. When coming up with a plan for your deck, having a wincon in mind is important, but I think people really overweight the end of games. In 1993, there was a study published about sticking your hands in painfully cold waters. I'll read the abstract now. Subjects were exposed to 2 adverse experiences. In the short trial, they immersed one hand in water at 14 degrees Celsius for 60 seconds. In the long trial, they immersed the other hand at 14 degrees Celsius for 60 seconds, then kept their hand in water for 30 seconds longer as the temperature was gradually raised to 15 degrees Celsius. Still painful, but distinctly less so for most subjects. Subjects were later given a choice of which trial to repeat. A significant majority chose to repeat the long trial, apparently preferring more pain over less. The results add to other evidence suggesting that the duration plays a small role in retrospective evaluations of adverse experiences. Such evaluations are often dominated by the discomfort at the worst and final moments of episodes. There is a very good Veritasium video about this study and others like it. I'll throw a card up if you're interested. I liked it, it got me thinking. But the gist is, why do people remember having their hand in very cold water for longer as a better experience? And the theory is we tend to overthink about the ending of things more than the experience overall. So in the 90-second trial, the temperature was increased by 1 degree, meaning the ending was a bit more pleasant. So you remember it more favorably. So how do we tie all this in with Magic the Gathering? Well, like the Ice Bucket study, I think people remember EDH games by the last turn. They recall the times their deck popped off and won a lot more than the times when their deck worked fine in the mid-game, but they lost to a combo they were not expecting. The duration of the game or peak moments are likely less impactful than the endings. You probably don't remember when you were in a commanding position if the game ended with you having nothing on board. This psychological bias, in tandem with power creep and the format speeding up, has caused players to tie their deck doing the thing with winning the game. Focusing on the end of the game and tying your wincon to doing the thing creates decks that lead to poor gameplay patterns. I call these decks feast or famine decks. A deck where if you do your thing, the game is over, or at least close to it. It doesn't literally need to end the game. Many of these decks are built around using their commander to snowball into a crazy amount of value, which wins the game. Nadu is probably the most egregious example. If you do the thing and get 15 triggers in 1 turn, the game might not technically be over, but you are almost certainly gonna win. Other commanders do this as well, like a Voltron deck with no backup plan. Same can be said for commanders that are combo pieces. If you're playing Pivot or Gitrog, then players will need to remove your commander many times to stop you from comboing off and winning. There are so many EDH decks that use their commander as a linchpin or value combo card. And players often feel their commander is not only the centerpiece of their theme, but also their best win con. Because of how snowbally and powerful these cards can be, you probably recall a time where your commander got out of hand and overpowered the whole table. This is most obvious when your commander is the centerpiece of the deck, but you could say the same for other commander decks as well. A dedicated combo list using Maze's End or Biovisionary is likely a feast or famine deck as well, because when you do your thing, it's going to win the game. So what's wrong with these decks where their win con is tied to doing the thing? I think they lead to bad games and feel bad moments all around. When a feast or famine deck plays, there are really only two options on how the game plays out. Either they play the snowball commander, it does the thing, and they win, or the deck gets shut down by having their stuff removed over and over again. A game where Krenko goes unchecked and taps twice and then they win is not particularly interesting. It just means nobody happened to draw the board wipe and you got your snowball commander out before other people did. But when the rest of the table draws their removal, or you don't get Krenko out that fast, and your commander gets destroyed 4 times, then the Krenko player will feel really bad because they didn't do anything all game, and they didn't do their thing. When you remember games, you tend to remember the endings more. You remember when your deck did pop off and you had that great ending. So many players over time will add more and more, win more synergy cards, and oftentimes trim away the veggies, removal and card draw, in favor of a more all-in solitaire game plan, which ironically makes doing the thing harder. When doing your thing is tied to winning, and the closer you doing the thing is tied to winning the game, it means other players are under more and more pressure to stop you from doing that thing, otherwise they're gonna lose. And this heavily affects the end of games. Even if you felt peak fun when you had 30 goblins on board, you're more likely to look poorly on that game because everyone needed to board wipe you over and over again to keep you from winning. So the last few turns of going land pass because Krenko costs more mana than you have to spend, that game is going to sit in your memory very poorly. You're going to remember that you never got to do the thing and swing with the goblins. So how do we get around this? If people naturally tend to have the ending of things heavily affect our memories, what can we do to make commander games feel more fun in retrospect? The first step is to have your theme separate from the win con. Many people tie the identity of their deck to the win con. This is probably why a lot of people conflate combo decks with a deck that has a combo in it. But how you win the game and the deck's identity do not need to be linked. Here's an example. A Greasefang deck that wants to reanimate a big vehicle. When you get an early Reaver Titan into play and chunk in for 10 damage, it feels really good. And it should. Reanimating a big vehicle is a powerful, fun thing. You got to do your thing, but this effect is not so powerful that the entire game is warped around your deck. You're not so far ahead that you're arch enemy forever, nor are you comboing off. People don't have to kill the Reaver Titan immediately, meaning you get another turn or two of swinging in and doing the thing. Your deck is part of the natural back and forth of the game. And being an artifact deck, maybe your win condition is something artifact related, like an artifact combo using pieces that work well with vehicles. Another example would be an Asmo Madness deck. It's really fun to cast Dark Withering for 1 mana, or surprise someone with a big game hunter. If your goal is to just get value from Madness, you can easily do that in most games. You might have a plethora of win cons that work well with the commander or the deck overall, but whether or not you got to use those win cons is separate from you doing the theme. I would recommend going this route, making your decks more broad and dynamic, instead of focusing so much on the ending of games. Instead of saying, this is how I win, play token generator, make the tokens big, think about the midpoints of the game. What token synergies can I use to draw cards or tap down creatures? Think about how you can utilize your theme on turns 3 through 6, not turn 8 onward when the game is ending. With more dynamic and thematic decks, the last turn will be less of my commander was removed for the 7th time, and more I've been casting madness spells all game, but was not able to get there in the end. a more pleasant and less frustrating ending. Just like sticking your hand in the bucket of ice water, even if the game overall was not super enjoyable, ending it by doing something more pleasant, like doing your thing, on the last turn will make you remember it more fondly and feel better overall about the game. I do want to be clear, I'm not saying cut all of your synergy pieces or win cons for pure value good stuff things. Just that you should have a deck which is more resilient and flexible, so a few board wipes is not game over, and you don't end up in this scenario where you never got to do any of your on-theme things. There is a lot more to be said about how mid-rangey snowball commanders and power creep has pushed us here, but in the interest of time, I'll leave you with two things. One, my friend Salubrious Snail made a video about how these snowball commanders affect EDH and doing your thing. Link in the description to check it out. Second is a story. A different friend of mine played Talrand for a long time. It was a Talrand polymorph control deck, where he made tokens and would polymorph a Blightsteel Colossus, since it was the only creature in the deck. And our playgroup realized we could never let him untap with Talrand. So people would hold removal for turn 4 and be ready to destroy Talrand at all costs. For a while, Talrand was getting crushed, but my friend did not change the list to make it more dynamic. Instead, he accepted that when he wants to do the thing, he wins. So my friend stopped casting Talrand on turn 4, 5, 6, or 7. Knowing we needed to hold up removal, he was very careful to wait for boots or the ability to hold up counterspells before casting his commander, playing more defensive and cheap counters and less big expensive ones. And eventually, he was able to do the thing again. So if you saw this video and said, well, what if I want to make a pile of tokens and anthem them? Then that's okay. You don't need a crazy complicated deck, but you need to accept the fact that players are not going to let you win the game for free. So pack extra protection, play more token generators, something to shore up those weaknesses. Ultimately, as commander players, you are likely to lose 75% of your games, assuming all things are even. It's hard to win more than you lose for most casual players, but I think many players lean too much on how those 75% of games ended. Oh, I didn't do my thing, so I didn't win. It sours the whole experience for you. By making your goal, your thing, something separate from your win con, it's now a lot easier to do the thing in almost every game. And even if it doesn't cause you to win, spending your last turns flipping that big morph creature or causing a fun political moment with your vote deck will cause you to look more fondly on that game. Thanks for watching. If you like this, consider subscribing, liking, leaving a comment. And if you want to support further, you can join the Patreon. You get access to my patron-only Discord and a bunch of other perks, like my tier 3 patrons whose names you see here in the credits.